Welcome to the Warships Podcast with your host, Kellorn, Venacera, and Arun.
Hello and welcome to episode 90 of the Warships Podcast. We hope you enjoyed our new intro, reflecting your three new permanent hosts. I'm Kellorn, and Venacera and Arun are with me today as we catch up from our week off. So we've got quite a few in-depth topics to talk about this week, but first we have to talk about the bomb that World of Warships dropped on us this week. For all of you who have been asking, World of Warships is coming to console in the form of World of Warships Legends. This was something we caught a glimpse of when we were in St. Petersburg for the CC Summit, but the timing of this announcement caught us just as much by surprise as everyone else. That said, I think that a huge new possible player base is nothing but good news for those of us who love World of Warships and the amount of content that we get to see. So I guess, Arun, Venacera, do you guys have any initial thoughts on this console announcement and what it might mean for World of Warships as a whole?
I think it's a very good thing. I'm somebody that never plays consoles. I've never owned any console of any kind. But I think it's a good thing because it does seem like consoles are incredibly popular. And I think if they can make the game work fine, then all the more power to them because it just opens up a larger player base and that's good for everyone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have several friends that are very much looking forward to this because they have either, the latest Xbox or PlayStation systems, and they want to play World of Warships. They don't necessarily have a good computer, but they play World of Tanks on a console and very much want to play World of Warships. So yes, I believe this will very much expand the audience. Just like, there's people who out there who are fans of the mobile versions of these games. So absolutely, expanding the player base and the audience, I think is always a good thing.
I like how we have Arun, who's literally never owned a console in his life, and then Vanessa, who I think has probably owned every console ever made.
Yeah, I just got a couple more classic ones too. So yeah, the collection continues.
It's just an interesting dichotomy. I guess one of the things for me is that, you've got console is a completely different control scheme and interface and things like that. And if we take World of Tanks, PC and console, those are not interchangeable. So the player bases are completely separate. The challenges of merging those servers and merging those UIs and things are significant, but it is something that I would like to see someday that we can play with console people. But I guess are you guys looking forward to them having a separate player base, or would you rather have them be a part of what we're playing now?
Ideally, I think it would be best if they were separate at first to see actually how it works out, and then try to make it so that it seems balanced, but it all depends on the control scheme. Like I have played the mobile version of World of Warships, and I would say that while the game is very, very similar, I don't think that it would be possible to have the mobile version play with the PC version just because the controls are so different. However, I do think that it might not be as bad with a console compared to, the PC, because the aiming in the game still depends on like the target you're looking at. So I feel like consoles aren't going to lose out nearly as much as they do in other shooter games.
Well, a lot of shooter games on console actually have an aim assist to them. Destiny is kind of famous for this. Destiny 2, when they released it on PC, had no aim assist at all, and it really catered to like the first person shooter market who really liked that you don't get aim assist, whereas the console version did have aim assist that honestly I always hated. So, I mean, there is some dichotomy there that they feel like the level of precision that you can get with a mouse and keyboard is different enough from the console controllers that they feel like they have to make up for that somehow. So I don't know how that would work in World of Warships.
Yeah, but we have aim assist in World of Warships anyway, though. So that's why I'm saying that I don't think the problem is nearly as big as it is in other types other games with shooting mechanics.
I guess, Vanessa, you play a few more consoles. Do you agree with Arun, or do you think that there might be something that needs to be done?
Well, yeah, I mean, I believe that the movement of the ship might be a little bit more enjoyable with a controller. Just thinking about using, an analog stick for the actual rudder and, moving left to right, and maybe even, if, say up and down on the stick also controls your speed, there might be some fine-tuned movement there that I think might be a little better on the console. But yes, the aiming obviously is always going to be better with a mouse. So I think there's going to be some trades there. There's going to be, you're probably going to move the ship a little better, but obviously, where you point the mouse, it's precisely where you aim that reticle. And with the console, you're going to have to take that second or so to get, and there's people who are really quick and really good at it, but it's still not as quick and precise as a mouse. So, I mean, there's going to be some trade-offs there, but I would be very interested to see how, the movement handles with, with a controller. I think that you're probably going to see, probably more linear, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I think with how a dual analog setup for aiming with two sticks, or, steering with one stick and aiming with the other, I feel like there's going to be more of a linear plane of kind of aiming and shooting, where, we definitely, I don't know about you guys, but oftentimes I will move my mouse up and down to kind of move the camera to kind of like get more of a bird's eye view, then right back down, bird's eye view, just kind of working in drawing lines in my mind. I don't use enhanced reticles. I use bare bones stock UI. And so I try and keep it simple, but I draw a lot of like imaginary lines, imaginary reticles in my mind to kind of judge the distance and judge the shot. And I feel like on console, you're probably just going to like, move that reticle roughly, or not move that reticle as much. And maybe there will be some auto aiming there, or I don't know. It's hard to kind of explain, but if you play a lot of consoles and play a lot of PC, then you know what I'm talking about.
Well, you talked for a while, so I managed to stop laughing, but the precise aiming thing seemed really funny to me in World of Warships, because, aiming very precisely is incredibly important in World of Warships, right? Because the shells go exactly where you aim them.
I think that she was more talking about like the precision of the actual.
Oh yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but no, you're right. It is kind of funny on one level. So I guess one of the other things that, we have been told that we as community contributors will get access to the early stages of the alpha or the beta or whatever it is for console. So we will have more information about that when it comes out, and we will actually get to try it out and play it if we desire. I'm pretty sure Arun might decide to skip that one, but I definitely want to give it a shot myself, and it sounds like Vanessa probably will as well. Now, one of the things.
I want to mention something, though, first on the console thing. Like Vanessa mentioned, right? I think the trickiest part is actually going to be the camera movement. I'm not even talking about the fact that you jump up and down, but rather if one of the sticks you use is for turning your ship and controlling it, and the other one is for aiming, how do you turn the camera around or look around you if you're trying to turn at the same time?
The most likely solution, I would imagine, would be to use one of the triggers to actually trigger the aiming mode. So I would imagine that your right thumbstick would be your camera control that would move your camera around 3D wise. And then you would say hold or push the left or right trigger to then basically do the aiming mode. And like you would a first person shooter, if you're going to aim down sights, you would hold down the trigger on most first-person shooters, and therefore that would probably trigger that mode. Then you would go in and adjust the zoom and everything from there. That would be my guess.
All right.
Yeah, apparently she's thought about this more than we have, Arun. That said, I completely lost my train of thought. What I was going to say next. Sorry. That was it. No worries. Don't worry about it. There are things about this game that are difficult to translate to console. And I know one of the big problems they had when they translated World of Tanks to console was their artillery system. And we do have something that's analogous in this game, and that's carriers. So what are you guys' thoughts on how carriers might get implemented in a console version, or do you think that they might leave them out entirely?
Well, a lot of people have been asking me about the carrier changes and what's going on. And well, there's a lot of things that we cannot talk about. I think, we can maybe kind of, say, there's probably a reason why the carriers are being changed and why it's kind of maybe taken a while for the carriers to be changed. And, well, consoles. So kind of keep that in mind, folks. As Wargaming is working on this, they have to keep in mind that they are developing for a great audience. So,
well, I mean, the really has the potential of really expanding the World of Warships player base to a level that we could see things that we would probably not otherwise have seen get developed just due to the amount of money that they could potentially bring in if it had stayed on just on PC. So from that sense, I really am in support of this idea of doing consoles.
Well, I just hope that they don't do it as like a second-class citizen, because I have seen some games recently do it kind of like that, where the console version is like, it's there and people play it, but it's not really the primary focus, or, it's not even seemingly a secondary focus. One example would probably be Path of Exile, where they do have a console version, but it's nowhere near like what the experience is on the PC. And I really hope that they don't do something like that, though.
That's an important point too, Arun. I mean, then you really start getting into subdividing the community, and the World of Warships community is already a pretty tight knit one, and so if you have ones that are quote unquote second class citizens, then you can potentially end up with backlash from the community, and this is going to get into things like tournaments. Well, okay, now is there going to be enough, or is there going to be equal support for PC-based tournaments and console tournaments? Or if the console ends up being 10 times the size of the PC game, or do they get 10 times the support? I mean, these are the things that will come up, kind of in the long run.
Well, not even just tournaments. I mean, matchmaking itself, though, right? If you play on Asia and you're playing at like 5 a.m. local time, you're going to have some trouble finding some types of matches. So if the player base on console is much lower, then the problem gets even worse there. If the player base is much higher, then, the problem is on the PC side. And those things do affect how Wargaming has approached development.
Right. And like I said, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and it'll be interesting to see how they do. I'm actually kind of curious. Do either of you guys know what the kind of relative size I assume that World of Tanks PC is just like enormously bigger than console, but I have no numbers to back that up. Do you guys have any idea?
No, but that just spurred me to look up the current console sale list. So I'm looking, with the PlayStation 4, they've currently sold almost 80 million units moved. And the Xbox One is between 25 to 30 million consoles moved as well. So just between those two units, that's an install base of potential 100 million potential players. So, I mean, at least you've got 100 million potential players there who could possibly download this game and play it.
So I actually looked it up a little bit. Apparently in February, there was an article that said 14 million players had tried World of Tanks since its release on consoles, and that it's about 230,000 battles every day. I don't know if that's a lot or not.
That seems like a lot, but we don't have any numbers to base that off of. But I mean, that kind of tells you that at least it's a healthy player base. But we're kind of well into the speculation, but we'll be hearing more soon, we hope. So last week, the devs held an open Q&A session with the community contributors. Vinacera and I were not able to attend, but Arun was able to sit in on it. So Arun, could you give us a bit of your impression of how the Q&A session went? Maybe if some things that you thought were good about it, some things that you thought might be improved next time, and if anything really stood out to you from what they said.
Good question. It's tricky. Okay, I'm sorry.
You had to do that, didn't you?
Yes. So the Q&A, I like the Q&A session because we get to ask questions that people have a lot of, and they're answered in a way that everybody hears the actual answer to, rather than it being spoken through one of us or misunderstood or something like that. Now, the trouble with live Q&A sessions like this is that the answers often are unsatisfactory because they just can't tell us the entire answer, because it takes a lot of time sometimes, and sometimes it's very difficult to give the background information. And I think one of the problems with a Q&A session like this is the fact that it's good that players hear it normally, but the bad side is that players don't have the experience or the information to put it all in the right context. So the developers have to answer the question. They have to basically keep PR in mind when answering these questions, because if they answer it in a completely straightforward fashion, which in my opinion, that's kind of what they did, more or less at least, the problem is that the player base can misunderstand some of the things, and that can cause problems because it'll be made into memes like, oh my God, look at these developers. They don't even understand this and this and this and this. And I think that's kind of a problem. Other than that, I did like the Q&A session itself, though, and I hope we have many more of these, and hopefully we'll get lots and lots of answers like this. Oh yeah, topics as well, I guess. So the main things that I liked during this Q&A were the questions that got proper answers to, and I'd like to discuss some of them with you guys.
Yeah, please lead the discussion. That's great.
So the developers mentioned that so there was a question about power creep and whether it was intended, and the developers obviously said that they don't like such a thing, but sometimes it happens. And I feel like power creep is actually something very normal to games, because it almost always happens, because players they know their relative power level at a time, and then they get really interested if something is slightly more powerful or slightly more useful or slightly different. But usually slightly different means that it has to be slightly more powerful. And I think power creep is kind of inevitable in online games. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I've always felt that power creep is inevitable when you have a game of the type that we're playing, that has, particularly because of how much new content gets added on a regular basis. When you have a game like, say, World of Warcraft, they rebalance things constantly, and you get what the Warcraft players call the flavor of the month. And so there's one spec that everybody's playing, and then it gets nerfed into the ground, and then there's a new flavor of the month the next month. But the reason that happens is because they're constantly balancing things back and forth within a relatively stable amount of content from month to month. Whereas in World of Warships, last year, I think we got something in the order of 40 new ships in the game, between new lines and new premiums. Over the course of a year, to get that much content and to not have power creep, I just don't feel like that's realistic. Now, I think that power creep is okay in one sense, as long as you continue to look at the older content and kind of give it the love that it kind of deserves. And we have seen that. I mean, we saw the Montana get their and Iowa and get their citadels lowered so that they're not quite as exposed, and they perform much better now. We're seeing Zhao get 12-kilometer torps. We saw Shimikaze get a concealment buff that made it the best concealed destroyer at tier 10. So there are little things like that I feel relatively confident that the dev team keeps a pretty close eye on and doesn't let any one ship get too far behind, with a couple of notable exceptions, but most of those are pretty low tier. So things like the Krasny Krim, I personally feel like is not a great ship, and they've never really kind of readdressed it. But it also wasn't a huge popular seller and isn't a ship that a lot of people play. So the reason to address something like that is pretty low.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit that spot on. We have the USN cruiser rework, and those, some of those ships have changed, quite a bit. Cleveland in mind. I know some people like it. Some people absolutely hate it. But it has been addressed along with, all the other ships that you mentioned. And I think power creep, just to kind of echo you guys, it's going to happen. With this much content and an online game like this, power creep is going to happen. And it's kind of, I don't want to say it's necessary, but when you add all these new ships and you're trying to make new content, invariably it's going to happen. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's only a terrible thing if you never address the original content with the new content. And I believe, just like you mentioned, Kaloran, they have gone back in ships that underperform. And we should note that, Wargaming is crazy about numbers. They have statistics on statistics on statistics, just looking at all the ships, all the stats, what's going on with them. They see things that the player base doesn't even know about. And they're able to go in there and look at those numbers and try and make judgments, make balance changes to that. And, I think they've done a pretty decent job at balancing for the most part. And, we also play a role. We test the stuff. We give them feedback, and, they tell us things that they see and what we're seeing. And then, players get their hands on it, and then we get to see the whole picture of, the stats and balancing how those ships perform in the real world. So
I guess one thing real quick that bringing up that topic, Vanessa, is one of the other things that got talked about a little bit, Arun, is that the community and the community contributors and the testers have a large influence on, premiums and the way that ships turn out. Can you talk a little bit more about what they said in that regard?
So, first of all, actually, something that we didn't mention so far, you can probably find a VOD of the Q&A or like a transcript of some kind if you just search for it. There should be on the forums. Probably,
I've actually got the link, and I'll put it in the episode description for the transcript.
That's even better, because so people can actually read it themselves to see exactly what it was about. So about the community, Wargaming did say that the community push absolutely influences the game, and it also influences the ships they pick. In terms of the game, that's kind of expected, right? Like if Wargaming hears complaints about certain ships, they look into it. For example, they've looked into the Conqueror. They found that the Conqueror doesn't outperform the other Tier 10 battleships. In fact, it's not even the best performing Tier 10 battleship. So they don't really change it much. Now, we can argue whether it's a good or bad thing. I don't know. But there is something for us to keep in mind. And Wargaming actually mentioned it themselves as well. That is, the people who listen to us or, we are friends with, those are people that are already almost always above average in terms of players. The people who are average and below that, those people aren't the audience for, people like us. They're not the ones that read Reddit or the forums usually. Because remember, the average player has a 40, below 50% win rate. Not to say that, anything bad about them. It's just that they see the game completely differently. And an example there would be that the Shimakaze, for instance, is the most popular Tier 10 ship in the game. And the reason why Wargaming mentioned this, they're not going to get rid of the 20-kilometer torpedoes, regardless what we want, is that very many people like them. and they have stats that back that up. In other words, this isn't something we realize, because to us, the 20-kilometer torpedoes seem completely useless, right? But to Wargaming, they seem great. And then there is the fact that Wargaming absolutely takes our feedback into account when they decide which ships to look for. I think the Haida was an example there. So, Wargaming absolutely cares about this stuff.
That's always been my impression, Arun. It's just a matter of, getting that feeling out to other people who aren't in quite as close of contact as we are, or we keep our pulse quite as much on what's happening in World of Warships, if that makes sense. Now, speaking of community influence, I believe that you put up a post about a certain ship this week, Vanessa, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The release of, or I shouldn't say release, the final stages, or the USS Massachusetts, it's in more or less its release form. And, we've had our chance to play with it. It is an interesting ship. I have a lot of fun with it. And it is a quote unquote brawling US battleship, or at least you get in close and have fun with your secondaries. And it really kind of spurred me. It's like, we have kind of an example of that in history, where a certain USN battleship, the USS Washington, just sailed right up to the Kirishima and just absolutely wrecked it in close quarters combat. And it really kind of annoyed us. Like, we have a historical ship that I really feel should be in the game. A lot of people agree. There's other historical ships that also should be in the game. And I was trying to come up with a unique way to, hey, how can we get this ship in the game and other ships like it without necessarily flooding the premium shop market? So yeah, I put up a forum post, and thank you for everyone who has participated in that forum post, and, just try and drum up support for more historical ships. I know a lot of people who listen to this show and play this game are big history buffs and love naval history. So thank you.
Wait,
So one thing that
you're talking about the Kitakami, right?
Sure, absolutely. As someone who actually has played Kitakami, yes, I definitely want to see that ship back in the game.
You guys are crazy. Absolutely crazy. But that's beside the point. One thing that did stick out when I was reading through the transcript, Arun, was that the idea that tier 7 and 8 cruisers may get some kind of comeback mechanic, but that comeback mechanic would not be a heal. And I agree that these cruisers in the 7 to 8 meta are in a really harsh spot, but I'm kind of at a loss for what they kind of might mean here. So did you have a chance to chew on this a little bit yourself? And do you have any more ideas of what they might mean here?
Honestly, I don't know. I thought about this, and I couldn't really come up with a good answer. Although they did say that it's probably not going to be a heal. So there might still be that at the end of the day, they'll be like, well, I guess we're going to give the tier 7 and 8 cruisers heal again. They did say that if they did that, then they would have to give the tier 9 and tier 10 cruisers something else. And one of the reasons why they don't want to do it is because they don't want to buff tier 10 cruisers, because they already seem powerful enough.
That's an interesting point too. I mean, most of the tier 10, we just got out of the tier 10 ranked season, right? And there were a lot of you saw more cruisers in that ranked season than I think all the ranked seasons that came before it combined, in my opinion, just because the tier 10 cruisers are just that good and they're that survivable in the tier 10 meta, where cruisers in the kind of the 6, 7, 8 range, they're quite a bit more fragile.
Actually, speaking of that, I want to mention about the earlier topic we were talking about, the power creep thing. I think that power creep might be one way where certain cruisers at tier 7 that were very popular in a certain ranked season could get balanced, even if those cruisers themselves don't get changed.
You speaking of the famous and historical HMS Belfast?
Yes, of course. Also speaking...
Yeah.
Go on.
No, I think that you're right. Eventually, the game will catch up to where Belfast is at right now. And until it does, they're not selling it anymore. So if you've got a Belfast, yeah, enjoy it, but don't expect it to stay that good relative to all the other ships forever.
Yeah,
also, speaking of Oh, no,
looking
go
at,
on.
and looking at other ships like Blisvika, is in pretty different state than it was at when that ship launched. Kutuzov is another example. And now Kutuzov is no longer sold, just like Belfast. But yeah, I mean, we saw changes with the open water stealth firing mechanic, and now changes to firing while in smoke. And that has affected those ships. So, yes, the I don't want to say power creep, but the changes of the game have adjusted the way we look at those ships, initially thinking them as, pretty overpowered to, now slightly a little different on, on our look of them.
Speaking of the Błyskawica, that is a ship they mentioned in the Q&A, and they said that the Błyskawica to them was okay because it was like, I think they called it something along the lines of a jack of all trades. That is, that the ship didn't have anything very special in it, but it wasn't bad in any of the things it did. At least that's how I understood it. I don't really quite agree there, but I mean, it's okay, I guess. I can live with that answer.
Well, I mean, I think the Błyskawica is a perfect example of a ship getting power creeped to normal levels. Like, when Błyskawica first came out, that first rank season that you could use it, Błyskawicas were everywhere and they were stealth firing like mad, and you couldn't do anything about them, and they could just burn you down and you couldn't see them, and there was craziness. And now you kind of look at a Błyskawica and you're like, okay, whatever, it's just another destroyer. So I think that's a case in point for what we were just talking about.
Also, the topic of... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and real quick before we moved on, to touch on the comeback mechanic for the cruisers, I was wondering if they're going to try and do something, like if you get so many kills, then you get this amount of health back, kind of like with some of the commander skill abilities that you see, like with Yamamoto. I know that it involves a heal, but again, to just kind of touch you, like, what kind of comeback would they come up with other than a heal? So I just wanted to throw that out there that, what if there was something tied to amount of kills? I know that would be really kind of hard to do with the UI in the system, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there.
I think I don't like that idea. Well, I do understand that it would be a comeback mechanic. I don't like it because it's tying something to kills. It's okay if it's, a very rare mechanic that is Yamamoto and pretty much only Yamamoto. But if you make it much, much more common, I think the issue becomes that people will try to steal kills way too hard. And if it actually makes you survive longer, I think people will get quite upset about somebody taking their kill.
Well, I mean, that was the argument that we made in the first place about Yamamoto. But I mean, that's other than giving those cruisers a heal, I really can't think of any other type of comeback mechanic, quote unquote comeback mechanic, that would allow you to have more staying power at the end of a match as one of those cruisers.
So what about instead of tying it to kills, you tie it to damage or number of citadels or number of fires that you set, something along those lines?
Yeah, that could work. I think that would actually be a lot better. Although, personally, I think they might actually do something like Adrenaline Rush instead, where they simply make your ship more effective when it's lower HP. I think while it's not something that gives you more staying power, it is something that boosts the side that has taken more damage.
Right, but half those ships get deleted from full health or have the potential to be deleted from full health. So that doesn't help you if you're dead. Now, granted, it wouldn't help you to be able to heal either, but still.
Wait, are you saying that you can't replace your ship with a heal? What is this pleb?
No. Only Conqueror and Minotaur can do that. So one of the other things that kind of caught my eye, speaking of Conqueror, is that at one point the devs were asked if Conqueror would get a buff to her top guns to make them more desirable. They said no, but they kind of said it in an interesting way that made me think that they might have a rebalance pass coming on Conqueror as the ship as a whole. I guess I don't like the fact that Conqueror has these 457 millimeter guns and literally nobody uses them. that there's no point in using them. In my mind, either the 457s are just too bad, or the 420s or whatever they are too good. So how do we, is that, now Arun, you just talked about a little bit ago that they said stat wise, Conqueror doesn't outperform what they would expect of a ship, but there's also the kind of the not fun factor of playing against her. And that might need to be addressed as well.
So what they said during the Q&A was that they weren't, at least not right now, planning to buff the 457mm guns because, sure, it might make people switch over from I think it's 419. I'm not actually certain anymore. Regardless, that people would switch over from the lower caliber guns and then they would just fire HE with the higher caliber guns. So they don't want that because nothing would change effectively, because people would still play the ship the same way. They did actually mention that they do think about changing it, but in a way where it would offer something different rather than being basically more of the same, just better.
Well, I find it kind of hard to believe. Remember Mogami a long time ago? Everyone used the 155s. No one used the 203s. And one of the reasons that was talked about in the change, one of the actual stated statements from Wargaming was that no one used the 203s, so we wanted to basically nerf the 155s. And let's not joke around here. The Mogami was the terror of Tier 8 for a reason, and those 155s were just ridiculous. But they nerfed the 155 so badly that everyone, then had to use the 203s. And instead of offering a unique flavor between the two, they nerfed one down to basically, it was so horrible to use it that, and you had to use the 203s, but no one liked using the 203s. Now we have an instance here where everyone is using the lower caliber guns and not using the 18-inch guns, the top guns for this ship. But their reasoning is not the same. And you touched on it, Arun, because the ship is not performing as well as, its contemporary or its counterparts. So I'm almost wondering if this ship was overperforming, if maybe we would see that exact same reasoning from Wargaming in their statements and changes to this ship. But I find it funny that, the popularity of these guns and the unpopularity of the 18-inch guns, they're not using that same reasoning necessarily as they did with Mogami.
Yeah, but the difference is that for the Mogami, what happened, Mogami was a cruiser, right? You can't really do something like, you would have to significantly change how AP works to make the AP like a viable alternative. But that's not the case for a battleship, so it would entirely be possible for Wargaming to make it so that the lower caliber guns end up being HE fired and the higher caliber guns AP fired. But on a cruiser, I don't think that would make much sense, at least not a Japanese one. So there is that possibility, in my opinion.
There was another point that caught my eye as well, and because I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion on the Conqueror issue today, but they also implied that they might have a consumable specifically to counter radar. And I'm assuming that this would be some kind of jamming, radar jamming equipment. And I understand the desire for this kind of module, the rock, paper, scissors kind of thing. But I also feel like that its usefulness will be far more limited than radar most of the time. And so that begs the question, what do you have to give up to take a radar jammer? And if you don't have to give up anything to take up a radar jammer, then it's an easy choice to make. But if you have to give up a spotter plane to take radar jamming, or you have to give up hydro to take a radar jamming, or you have to, God forbid, give up defensive fire to take radar jamming, is it worth it?
Depends. If you're talking about competitive, probably. But in random battles, probably not, because these things, they don't reward you, really. So I don't think in randoms you would see a lot of it. Although if they end up winning you lots and lots of games, then perhaps.
I guess I feel like it's a module that would get used far more often in competitive than in random. And if that's the case, is it worth doing? I mean, maybe it is. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that, you have to kind of think about that as well. And, I don't know.
Well, those are the players that are mostly complaining about it. So I would say that those are the players that would want it the most.
Well, they also talked a little bit about radar line of sight and islands as well. Did they not, Arun?
Oh, yeah, they did. So basically, this is a topic that's actually something I think we should talk about. Because Wargaming basically was asked whether radar would get line of sight. That is, if you are behind an island, that radar would not, reveal you anymore. Because, well, that's kind of how radar works in real life, right? But Wargaming said that that's not something they want to do because it is too complex for the player. Now, this is actually something I mentioned earlier. If people hear this, that is normal players, especially the ones that will listen to this podcast, most of them will think, well, what do you mean too complex? How is that complex? That's so simple. Look, if they are behind an island, then you just don't see them. What's so difficult about it? But this is actually something that game designers have to keep in mind a lot. You want to make sure that the mechanics you add to a game are fun. One big example of no-nos would be examples where the player doesn't have control over their own character. That is, if you have a mechanic like stuns in MMORPGs, then having lots and lots of stuns makes the game less fun to play because players don't like it when they don't have control. And there are many things in games that are no-nos like this. And I suppose that for Wargaming, having radar be based on line of sight was one of them, because I suspect that they actually tested this and then, had lots of data crunching and all that done to, find out whether it is or isn't good. Because, well, Wargaming seems to care about historical accuracy at least a little bit. Okay, actually, they seem to care a lot about it. So I'm fairly certain that they had these complaints internally themselves, but they never, showed us a version without it. So I'm guessing the problem was quite big.
There could also be limitations of the game engine with this too.
Well, that's true, but I don't think that's really one of the bigger problems. I mean, there is one problem, right? With the fact that when a ship disappears or reappears, it takes a while for it to happen. So if there's line of sight and, a ship is zooming past lots and lots of islands, that one could be an issue and annoying to play against. And, perhaps this is one of the reasons why they found that it wasn't a fun mechanic. But in my opinion, this is something that we have to basically take their word for it.
I'm kind of two minds about it, though, Arun. I mean, like, I get what you're saying from a game standpoint, that it makes sense. As far as game design and player base is concerned, yet anybody, like, in a sense, it's immersion breaking, right? Like, I always feel like it's immersion breaking that I can hit one button and see everybody within a bubble, no matter what my radar beams are hitting. Like, absolutely, if the island, we already have a mechanic in the game called spotting. If you can see the top of their mast over the back of the island, you can spot them. So in my mind, the ability of the mechanic is still there. It's not like you can see a ship behind an island, if without radar. So that you can start getting into, like, you have one reason for regular spotting and another reason for radar spotting. Why are the definitions different? Why are the expectations different? So, if you can see the ship behind the island, the top of the mast, why wouldn't the radar work too?
Planes are already a different way of spotting, though, right? Because you can have your ship can literally be hidden behind a cliff, but if the plane is within spotting range, they get spotted immediately. I think it's exactly the same reason there.
Well, plane spotting is also somewhat controversial as well, right? I mean, a plane can spot you without you spotting it, or being able to shoot at it, which is frustrating for a lot of players. And two, the planes don't respect, line of sight either.
Or the
if they're, so I mean, like, they fly over and you may be blocked between their line of sight and have a mountain between their line of sight and you, but if you're within the range, then they spot you anyway. So it's in that sense, they're similar to radar.
Well, that's exactly what I meant. We already have this, or, we have another example, and even before radar was added. Although, I'll be honest, I do think that it would be cool to see what the public test version of radar with line of sight would be like, because I think that it might not be as bad as Wargaming found it to be.
See, honestly, if I could rework radar, I would have radar actually show people's positions on the minimap, but not actually reveal their positions when you're looking at it, unless you are the ship that's actually using the radar, in which case you would have radar assistance with your guns, quote unquote. And that would be my immersion with it. If you have a cruiser next to you and they're radaring, they could share that information on the minimap and put that out there for the team. But only the ship that is using the radar, I feel, should be able to see whatever it is that they are radaring. That's me, but
hold on, physics don't support that. So if you say you're in ship A, Vanessa, and so say you're Washington, right? You're USS Washington. I'm in Sodak, and we're engaging Hiroshima. In Sodak, if I use my radar, you can pick up the radar bounces from my radar, even if your set is not on active.
Well, true. How many times did they have to stop, check fire to make sure that they were not accidentally firing on a friendly target and losing and getting radar contact?
I'm just saying that there are other ways that radar works besides just that.
Well, I mean, we've got RPF in the game too. So, I mean, I get that. But I'm just saying from a gameplay standpoint, I feel radar would probably be a lot better overall if it was toned down a little bit, where the person who's using the radar gets the most advantage from it, but still gets information to their team. I don't know. Because there's so much radar in the game, and especially as a destroyer player, I'm not going to get started on this.
Yeah, that's a whole one, and it had a big to do in the last rank season, which I think we'll talk about in a second. But Arun, you said that you wanted to talk a little bit about manual secondary fire.
So I think manual secondary fire would be another example of the gameplay mechanics, or rather the fun from the player perspective, dictating what to do with the what decisions to make in the game. That is manual secondary fire. That is, you aim your secondary guns yourself, right? And the reasons they gave for it is that, well, you have to do lots of context switches, and even in ships like battleships where you have 30 seconds between shots, what you would have to do is, well, you fire your guns, now you jump out of the artillery view, you switch to a secondary set of guns, you aim at a different target because secondary range is different, right? And then you fire, and you have to do it constantly, and then swap back to the guns again. While, in my opinion, this sounds really fun and could actually be really interesting if this was in addition to the automatic secondary firing, so you could just switch over, right? I think it would be fun, but I can understand why this would be something from a game design perspective that wouldn't be a good thing. And they brought up even an example. So if you play World of Warships on mobile, they actually have manual secondary firing. That is, you can manually fire them. However, according to Wargaming, very few people ever use it because, well, first of all, it's even more annoying to switch context on the phone. So, you spend even more time on all of this, and it's just better to use your main guns instead.
It's actually a really difficult thing to do. The amount of time that you have between your shots just often isn't enough. And on a battleship, on a PC, I think it would be plausible. But for everything else, it's just really not.
For those of you who are interested on this topic in particular, I believe Tedster on the forums, it was in the alpha test. They actually did alpha test this a long time ago, and there was a stage of it, and they kind of go over that. So there is a period where they did test this and go through it. You can read up on it on the forums and find exactly what kind of happened through those tests and what Wargaming learned from there. And this is coming from like one of the biggest proponents of secondary battery use out there. And as much as I would love to be able to use secondaries, the combat and the time between main battery shots, it would be really hard to utilize every weapon system on your ship and have that much uptime to get the most out of it. And so I totally understand why Wargaming has set up the way they have, set this game up with secondaries.
So we actually do have a couple more things I want to talk about today, and we've spent quite a bit of time on the Dev Q&A, which I think is rightly so. But the next big topic was the release of details on Arsenal, which is scheduled for patch 0.7.8, which means that we will probably see it around the end of August. The Arsenal will replace all current ranked/clan battle reward systems, as well as add coal rewards for non-competitive game modes. Some examples of rewards purchasable for coal will be Salem, Igel, Yubari, Musashi, Campbelltown, and the October Revolution, which I still can't pronounce properly. You'll be able to do flags, camos, campaign containers, and special upgrades such as the radar upgrade, hydro, etc., all for coal. Then you'll have rewards that are purchasable for steel, which will be things like Flint, Black, and Stalingrad. So players will get steel rewards based on their current progress in ranked seasons and clan battles, and you can see a little bit more about how that's going to work in the post. And additionally, players will earn 5 coal for every 1 oil they've ever received, regardless of if you're still in that original clan or clans or not. So this is another thing they kind of teased us with at the CC Summit. And frankly, it will simplify the reward system for ranked and clan battles, which had really gotten to really beyond loaded levels, and will allow players to earn what they want instead of having to climb a ladder. So both overall, what do you guys feel about Arsenal, and how is this going to affect clan battles, clan battles in ranked season, which we just finished?
Well, I'm hoping that I have a pretty favorable amount of steel coming, because had I ranked out the previous season, I would have gotten USS Black. So, I was pretty close got up to, or ended at rank 5, and just stopped there. So I'm wondering if it's going to take that into consideration. The previous 2, obviously,
you'll get 5,000 steel.
Yes.
So they actually put that in the post. So like I just earned Flint, so I got my 3rd ranked rank 1. So that got me Flint. I will get no steel from my ranked rewards because I've got Flint. And then people that have done 4 or 5 seasons, if you've done 4 seasons. You've got your Flint, but you'll also get 5,000 steel, which is half the price of Black. And then if you had 5 wins, you will get nothing because you have your Flint and you have your Black. And then if you have 6, you'll get 2,500. If you have 7, you'll get 5,000. If you have 8, you'll get 7,500 steel. So, and you wouldn't get the bonuses from the things before. So they're kind of staging it like that, which kind of makes sense to me because you're getting rewards for the things you did. But if you already got your reward, you're not getting a double reward.
Well, that makes sense. My question is, how much steel are you getting for not ranking out last season?
I don't think you get any. I think you only get for previous ranks. It's only previous rank 1s.
That doesn't sound nice to me.
I'm just going off of what the post says. This may get changed, but from the way I read it, it's your previous seasons that you achieved rank 1.
Well, I guess if we complain enough about it, maybe it'll get changed.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that's right. I mean, if you push up quite a ways, you should at least get however much equivalent going forward, because they already have a provision for this that they said as you move forward, you get a little bit of steel as you progress through the ranks or through clan battle. So even if you don't reach the top, you're still getting a little bit over time for your effort.
But at the same time, Vanessa, I don't know if they're going to remove a lot of the stage rewards that you get as you're ranking up. So as you rank up, you get flags and things like that as you get to certain ranks. And now all that stuff is going to be purchasable in the shop. And if you're not going to get things like that, all you're going to get is steel for achieving ranks. Then they may feel like, hey, you already got your rewards if you didn't make it to rank 1.
Interesting.
I mean, I may be wrong. I may be right. I have no idea. This is all speculation. So I guess that kind of brings me back to the clan battles thing a little bit. And Arun, they covered that a little bit in the Dev Q&A as well. But since we're talking about Arsenal and clan battles, why don't you bring that up real quick here?
I'm sorry. What?
So they talked a little bit about what clan battle seasons were popular and why in the Dev Q&A. It's something. Didn't they say that season 4 was the most popular season?
That was ranked though. We haven't had 9 clan battle seasons.
Sorry, I apologize. I meant ranked, not clan battles. You know what I meant.
Okay, I was confused there for a moment. Okay, so so the most popular ranked season. So what Wargaming does is they have like a survey at the end of a ranked season or after the ranked season, where they ask people lots and lots of questions, and then they analyze their results and try to figure out what they did right, what they didn't do right. And according to those surveys, this season 4 ranked was the most popular ranked season, or at least it was the season that people seemed to like the most. And the second most popular actually was season 9. That is the season that just ended. So it seems people actually enjoyed this season quite a bit. Now, the tier 10...
What's interesting is that... So I had to go look this up, everyone. And season 4, it was tier 5 and 6 up to rank 16. And then once you got above that, it was 6 and 7. And this is one of those that people actually did complain about a little bit because people would bring down-tiered ships into games. So the fact that season 4 was the most popular kind of boggles my mind a little bit.
Well, again, when they do these surveys, they take like a real cross-section of the players rather than just what we think and what we hear on the forums and Reddit and all those places. So it might very well be that the season was really popular among the players we don't usually hear from.
What, there's something wrong with stock New Mexico in ranked?
Actually, wasn't that the season where Mitsuki was a tier 6 destroyer and was actually the best ship for spotting?
Yes, that is exactly the season. I can't remember if that season had Belfast or not.
No, I don't think it did.
I don't
There's
think
definitely
it did
a Sims ranked season as well.
I remember ranking out and we won the last match because we had that kind of a Mitsuki that spotted a lot. It was really enjoyable.
Yeah, I remember that season as well. That was an interesting one. So that tells you something a little bit about maybe that it's not so popular to have mono tiers. I mean, I guess in you guys' opinion, real quick, would you prefer mono tier battles, or do you like that idea that people can bring more ships?
I like mono tier more because it means that people are less likely to make really. So it means that matchmaking is going to be more likely in a balanced fashion rather than, you getting a tier 9 while the opposing team gets a tier 10. And I'm not talking about the fact that you might not have the same amount of tier 9s and 10s, but rather that one tier might get a tier 9 Soviet cruiser, the other one gets a tier 10 one.
Right. The other thing they said is that they're not going to do tier 9 ranked, and that they want to make the next ranked season be a little bit more inclusive. So what do those things tell you about where they're thinking about the next ranked season, Aaron?
Well, I mean, the tier 9 ranked thing or problem was rather that people usually don't keep their tier 9s compared to the other tiers of ships, mostly because they want to get their tier 10s more quickly. And usually that means that they sell their tier 9 so that they can buy the tier 10. And that's one of the reasons why Wargaming isn't going to do tier 9 ranked, because it would require people to buy the ships again, because tier 9 only has, 3 premium ships compared to all the other tiers. But about the next season, from what I understood, it seems that players seem to like more casual seasons, and one of the things that they would like to try would be a more casual ranked season. I'm not sure what that entails, but...
I was going to say, what does that even mean?
With regard to tier 9, I just, it boggles my mind. There's some really popular tier 9 ships then in there, and I don't understand why Wargaming hasn't thought to use the rental ships like they do with clan battles, and throw out, you could do a tier 9 ranked season and put some ships out there for people to use temporarily and rent them and bring them in. I just, you can do it for clan battles, but you can't, use that same system for, say ranked battles.
Well, I mean,
clan battles, they're already controversial in clan battles, so I think they would be even more controversial in ranked battles, don't you, Arun?
Okay, so here's how it would go. Oh my god, we have a rental Iowa. Wow, what a noob. Please uninstall the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you could improve that system. You could actually allow them to use camo, and you could probably even separate clan battles and ranked into something that is completely not monetary, completely, just a straight up competitive setting where you don't lose money, you don't gain money, you're playing it for the rewards. And you could put it out there of, okay, here you go. And instead of making it about premium, non-premium, money, not money, reducing the amount of, cost per battle, and actually make it a straight up competitive setting where, okay, you go in and make it almost like, a test account where you have access to all the ships and it's just a competitive game mode. Pick the ship you want, pick the modules you want, your captain, go in there, and it's straight up your skill versus their skill.
But that doesn't give me a feeling of pride and accomplishment when I look at the credits amount at the end of the season.
I mean, I'm kind of two minds about that, Vanessa, because you've got, if from a purely competitive standpoint, you have that would give you an absolutely level playing ground. I mean, nobody would have an advantage over anybody else that because they had premium or something like that. Yet at the same time, like Arun said, is that, hey, look, you've got people that have a lot invested in this game, and if now all of a sudden that investment, that time investment or monetary investment means nothing, then that affects you as well.
I have almost 500 million credits. I'm not worried about money anymore. I mean,
but that's my point. That's my point, is that you're not worried about money and I'm not worried about money. I'm not even really worried about doubloons. But the number of people that are in that particular situation in the game is much smaller than the people that are like, man, I really want to buy that ship, but I have to farm my credits. I have to farm 20 games in my premium ship. Do you have enough credits to buy it?
So if you didn't have to worry about that and you could go into a competitive setting, you could actually play competitively, not having to worry about a monetary investment on that.
Yeah, but then you end up playing like 50 hours of the game and you are still at the exact same spot in terms of how many credits you have.
I think there's arguments to be made on both sides and maybe tweaks to be made, but this is one of those things where they have to, and I don't know how successful they feel clan battles rental ships have been, because if Wargaming feels like rental warships have been a spectacular success in clan battles, then I think that's much more likely we would see something like that, or the system that you're talking about, Vanessa, in ranked battles. And that is more or less the impression that I've gotten from them. When you get to the Typhoon and Hurricane leads, it's pretty unlikely that you see rental ships on a game to game basis. But from what I understand, in the mid to late season, in the kind of the mid tier leagues, you see a lot of rental ships, and a lot of the clans that struggle for people to have the ships that they need. They're using rental ships on every game basis, and so in that sense, it's a good thing. I think that if you saw it in ranked, it would be much more likely for people to be able to play rental ships in kind of the lower ranks. As you got to the upper ranks, I think it would be less and less common. Alrighty. Arun, were there any other little things that you wanted to throw in there from the dev Q&A before we call it a day?
Sure, I'll go through them quickly. So consumable placement and hotkeys may or probably will become tweakable. That is, so that you might be able to make sure that you can set the hotkeys for every single ship separately, so that you won't accidentally press T for heal, but actually heal is on you and T is something else. Wargaming also isn't happy with the way containers and super containers are, but we didn't get any real information about that. Then spotting icon priority will probably be looked at, so that when you are spotted or unspotted, when you get spotted in a destroyer and you are spotted by a ship from surface spotted, you don't know if you can safely use smokescreen, because it might be that you're spotted by a radar at the same time and you don't get the information from both of those at the same time, or actually I don't know why, we just don't get it. So if you are spotted and you use smoke and you think you should be unspotted, radar might still be spotting you and you don't have this information, and this will be looked at. Then Izumo, according to Wargaming, has seemed slightly subpar, so it might get looked at. And the CV rework opens up the possibility for aviation battleships and cruisers, like the Tona.
So we finally might get Tone that has been in the game files forever.
Hopefully.
I know Kami has wanted to see Yamashiro, which is the Issei class aviation battleships. So we'll see.
Wasn't that the Fuso class battleship?
Was it?
I mean,
so the four Fuso and EAs are Fuso, Hyuga, Issei, and Yamashiro. And other than Fuso and Issei, I don't remember which one's which.
So Fuso and Yamashiro are Fuso, like Fuso, and Issei and Hyuga are more the aviation things, I think.
Okay, then we'll see. Were there any other ones that you might have seen as well, Vanessa, in the Dev Q&A?
No, we pretty much covered. I know we'll at some point talk about the legendary upgrade changes, but the Q&A pretty much covered. Yeah, pretty much covered. I mean, I know we have our agreements and disagreements, and we have a lot to go through with all of that. But I think we covered the hot topics.
Agreed. And I was intending to talk about the legendary upgrade changes that got made this week, but we kind of ran out of time because we had so much to talk about. So we will dig into that a little deeper next week. Next week, we'll also be having Earl Grey on as a guest from his new position as a member of the Wargaming staff in St. Petersburg. He has actually become the CC coordinator for the global CC program, so we've been talking to him on a daily basis. And we look forward to chatting with him on the show, as he is an old friend of the podcast, and he loves listening to us as well. So that's pretty awesome. Arun, Vanessa, did you guys have any announcements from your end this week?
Not that I can think of.
Nope.
Alrighty. Well, I need to get on a couple of giveaways that I need to deal with for the June handouts. So you guys can keep an eye on Twitter and Facebook for those, as well as I will announce them on the podcast when they are live. And that's it for this week, folks. As always, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Warships Podcast and Twitter at Warships Podcast for updates between episodes. Don't forget to check out Arun on YouTube and Twitch as well. Arun, what days are you Twitch streaming right now, or do you not have a regular schedule?
I do not have a regular schedule. Let's put it that way.
Oh, got to work on that.
Yes, I do.
If you're looking for some podcast swag, we've started up a store on Spreadshirt.com that makes podcast branded shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, mouse pads, and other cool things. The URL for that is shop.spreadshirt.com/Warships Podcast. And we, of course, want to thank our amazing Patreon backers. If you're interested in supporting us, please consider becoming a backer yourself. Backers get access to special giveaways, like we mentioned in previous episodes. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next week.